Madam Chair, members of the board, pleasure to be before you today. I am wearing my engineering shirt, so I didn't dress up and look really fancy like the Corps, but I'll do my best.
We don't believe you're an engineer if you don't.
So I'm happy to get the opportunity today to update you on the work Reclamation is doing to address the safety of dam issues at Vado Dam. And so just to give you a brief overview for the presentation we'll go over is just addressing the project management team, updating on the point behind the project and the need for action at Vado Dam, along with the accomplishments from this last year's construction season, updating the board on the changed conditions that we found from construction, and the items that we presented to the board during our last meeting that we had with you last year, and then bring you up to speed with where we plan to go and our path forward for the next construction season coming up in 2024 and the future spillway and stilling basin modification work. And then finally, we'll update the board on the current and expected schedule and budget. So just to remind everybody on the need for action, this is one of few steel faceplate dams that we have in the world, and it's almost 100 years old now, and so it's getting up there. You can see the middle image is the current status of the spillway, and you can see the level of rust and corrosion that's going on, and you can see the comparison of the faceplate on the left two images when it was being constructed versus it now. And so it does have a lot of safety of dam issues that we were concerned about involving seepage as well as the spillway, and trying to protect the 1,000 lives at risk downstream, as well as protecting the critical infrastructure to the Conservancy District. This next image shows the dam also at that time. And what I wanted to highlight in this image is you can see the distance between the faceplate and the underlying embankment. And that's one of the things that we'll bring up to you with the need for doing the backfill grouting and some of the challenges that we've been facing with that. Here's another image showing construction photos at the time, showing that void underneath the faceplate and them using shovels to try to fill that void as they were building it. And this next one shows another image of that void behind there, along with today's voids that are still behind there and the need to provide some back support for the liner that will eventually go on there. And as you can see, early 1930s is when it was built. We're coming up on about 100 years old, so I need to have a birthday party for it planned in the near future. The next slide goes over a brief overview for what we're doing. You can see the gray part at the bottom of the faceplate. We were doing backfill grouting, or phase 1 backfill grouting below the water surface. So the blue line just represents the water surface at the current water restriction. So we did that last year, and we started on the green portion, which is the second phase of the backfill grouting. And we've been continuing that this year. And that was our main effort this year. And then that tan portion is the foundation grouting. And we were doing the preparation for that with the grout cap construction this year and getting it prepped so that way we can start foundation grouting. Hopefully this next season is what we're shooting for. And then also that green portion represents the area that's going to be covered with the liner when that time comes in about 2025. And so the next slide shows a little bit more about the voids underneath. An example in the middle image of a liner placed on a dam that was in Europe that has been performing well. And then on the right is an example of the different layers of that lining material. And then an example of the dam and the work that we're doing there on the bottom. Keep in mind, there's a lot of information on these slides that was done on purpose, so that way something's left behind for additional detail. Obviously, we don't have time to cover everything during this meeting, but it will at least provide more information for you to review later if you would like. So as we mentioned, the team was already introduced. We do have members of Reclamation as well as members of Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District represented as part of the project management team. And so we appreciate Jason and Eric and their help with their involvement with that. And so this is just a list of the people who are involved in the project. Trying to keep the list of people directly involved small, but there is a large team overall involved with doing our best to accomplish this work and to do it well. And so right now, I'll turn the time over to Mike Talbot, and he'll go over the seepage reduction modification work that's been happening this last construction season and update you on some of the progress we've made.
Thank you, Adam. Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'm pleased to be in front of you today to give you a little synopsis of the work that we've done this last year. Go ahead. I'll breeze through these first few slides. What I wanted to convey to the board is not just what we did this last summer, but how complicated this project is. It's not as straightforward as you might think. One of the first things we had to do was get a bunch of little projects done and out of the way to make the site safe for the workers. One of them, these bollards along the crest were crumbling and pieces of concrete would fall and trickle down the faceplate and dent trucks and break glass and things like that. So we replaced some of these. Go ahead. There was a sinkhole that we had to repair near the left abutment. That was a relic of the original construction. Those investigation shafts, one of them was not completely filled in, so we filled that in. Go ahead. Another picture of filling the sinkhole in. Go ahead. One of the things we had to do very first was what we call the bulge repair. Up at the top, near the left abutment, there's basically a wrinkle in the faceplate liner. Go to the next one. There's a closer up picture of it that basically the crest of the dam settled a little bit and put a fold into the faceplate of the dam, the liner, and it had to be replaced. The contractor had to move in, cut those pieces out, and replace them. This shows you a view of what that looked like. You can see the space between the faceplate and the dam. Right there in the middle of the picture, you can see that bent piece of metal that gives you an idea of just how bad that got bent from the settlement, and that had to all be removed. One of the things I wanted to point out too is that this worker here is grinding the coating off the faceplate. Anywhere that we did work, whether it was cutting, grinding, welding, anything, that lead-based paint had to be removed and vacuumed up. He's got a vacuum there behind him. They had to vacuum up the particulate matter, and it had to be packaged and taken off site. That's not an easy task. Go ahead. So that's a completed view of that bulge repair. They did an awesome job. The subcontractor did a great job, and there was a lot of welding on that. Go ahead. Next, we had to cut pieces of the follow plate. Now, down at the bottom of the dam and along the sides where the metal faceplate meets the concrete wall, where it attaches to the wall, it's attached with this follow plate. And you can see that over the years, that follow plate has taken a lot of abuse from Mother Nature. Go ahead. And you can see how that follow plate bent up and basically was no longer fit for putting a liner that we will eventually put on there. So we had to have a contractor come in, cut all that follow plate. And again, it had to be ground and vacuumed and cleaned off. And we didn't cut all of the follow plate, but a lot of it. So, and then another piece that we had to do was along this concrete wall that we just looked at that had the follow plate on top of it, we had to do some concrete saw cutting. And you can see the size of the saws. You can see the cramped quarters that they worked in. And this was to make a better contact surface for what the grout cap will be placed against. And I'll get to the grout cap in a minute. But we did a lot of saw cutting. You can see in this photo where in the left side, bottom left, you can see the saw that's sitting there, but the contractor also had to come back through and chip away the concrete after it was sawn And all of that had to be collected, hauled off site, and it was painstaking. Go ahead. One of the other things we had to do leading up to the bigger parts of the project was this plinth wall, which is the concrete wall that the metal faceplate attaches to, had cracks in it. You can see at where the little white funnel is on top of the wall, just to the left of that, there's one of the cracks that had to be repaired. And I think there were 13 cracks that we actually had to repair. That was painstaking work. An iPhone can't do this kind of work. So there's no technology that improves it. It just has to be filled with epoxy. Go ahead. A closer up look of one of the cracks that had to be filled. Go ahead. Another problem that we had in the spring was this. As you know, the river had a lot of water coming down it, abnormally so, and it moved a lot of debris into the reservoir, which made its way to the outlets. So you can see that the outlet was inundated with this debris. It caused problems. It caused problems with the ability to evacuate the reservoir. The solution we came up with was we borrowed some airboats from the Elephant Butte Division of Reclamation. They brought these airboats down, and we basically took the airboats out there and they blew all the debris away from the outlets and over to the other side of the dam. And then they picked it up with a track hoe, put it in a dump truck and hauled it off. This is painstaking work, and this is after the first 2 or 3 times. We didn't do this just once. We did it numerous times because we'd get it all cleaned out and then another storm and more water and more debris. It became a big issue. Go ahead. Another task that we had to do was up at the top of the faceplate, there's this curved surface. You can see that silver curved metal surface, and that's what's called the wave deflector. When the reservoir's full, it absorbs the wave action along the dam, and there's some voids along between the faceplate and the wave deflector that had to be filled with grout. We did that. This is a picture of the left side of the dam in preparation for the grout cap. Now, the grout cap is a horizontal piece of concrete that runs along the upstream side of the wall. And it's, as Adam mentioned, I think, mentioned that the grout cap will house these standpipes that will be for the foundation grouting program eventually. But the grout cap had to be constructed now. One of the things we had to do was fill in, you can see the geology that we were faced with, that had to be filled in with slush grout and lean concrete before we even get to the reinforced concrete of the grout cap. So there was a whole program of slush grout and lean concrete. Go ahead. You can see these are a couple pictures of what is the lean concrete underneath the grout cap. On the picture on my right, where the fill is against it is lean concrete, and then the top 18 inches or so will be that reinforced concrete grout cap. Go ahead. Just another picture of lean concrete going in. Go ahead. So here's the preparation of the grout cap. So along the wall, the left image is a picture of some of the concrete repair. Now that's original construction, and there were numerous places in the wall that actually had this honeycombing, we call it, and they had to be repaired. On the right image, you can see that worker, he's actually drilling dowel holes for reinforced rebar that has to go in from the grout, what will be the grout cap, into the existing concrete wall. Go ahead. Here's another picture of the preparations for the grout cap up near the left abutment. You can see the wall that got cut with those big saws, and then they chipped it out, getting ready for the forming to come in. Here's a picture jumping way forward is what the grout cap will look like. They've formed up the grout cap, they've put in the rebar, they've put in the stand pipes for what will be the foundation grouting, plus all those dowels that had to be doweled into the wall, and right underneath those dowels, that white strip of plastic, that's water stop. And that water stop had to be installed by hand all the way down from top to bottom. Every square inch of that grout cap has the water stop. And it's time consuming, it's painstaking work. This is kind of a finished product of, or a finished image of what that will look like, what it does look like. This is the double curtain. Farther up the abutment, it's only a single curtain, but this shot shows you the double curtain of what will be the grouting program for the foundation. Go ahead. Another picture showing the hopscotch pattern of how they install that grout cap. They hopscotch those so they can make more than one placement in a day or in a week. You can start to see how congested the site is starting to be. You've got the scaffolding for the faceplate work that's sitting in place, and this grout cap, the construction is moving down towards the water. And in the background, you can see what is starting to be the grout plants for the backfill grouting. Go ahead. A couple pictures I wanted to throw in showing the nuances of the grout cap work. There was the left image, my left shows some shoring that had to be put in so that wall didn't move while the excavation was that deep. There was some concern about that, so we had to build that shoring. There were some fairly intricate rebar placements that had to be made going over those steps in the grout cap as it makes its way down. Go ahead. Lastly, one of the finished shots of the grout cap and the single line, you can see the follow plate in that spot was actually in really good shape, and so we didn't have to cut the follow plate there. Go ahead. Another last picture of what the grout cap looks like. And you can start to see on the right-hand side of that picture where the scaffolding is. You can start to see where we've already done some grouting behind the faceplate. And you can see the grout nozzles and where the grout makes its way out of the observation holes and drips down the face. That's what that is. But that means we've already started grouting. So there's a lot of things going on at the same time. Go ahead. The picture on the left shows an area down at the bottom near the lake water that came into question. There was an area of that concrete wall that we weren't sure was founded on bedrock. And so we had the reclamation crews from Utah come down with their rigs and do a little bit of drilling in that area, actually where the grout cap was supposed to be, but they had to do some exploratory drilling to make sure that we knew where that concrete wall ended. Go ahead. So they came in, did a series of holes. This is just a couple shots of the geologists and what it looks like after they've been in, done their drilling and moved out. Go ahead. Now we start the backfill grouting. Now what we call the backfill grouting is the grout that is pumped behind the faceplate, between the faceplate and the actual soil of the dam that fills that void that we've talked about in several pictures. So that's what we call backfill grouting. This is a picture of the grout plant set up down at the bottom where the contractor's getting ready to get the mixers going. And on the right, they're doing their trial batches. Go ahead. This shot shows you on the left some of the scaffolding that had to be put in place. And and a lot of their hoses that had to be run across the face of the dam to do all this grouting. They had to insulate the hoses. At first, it was really cold, and then it was really hot, and we dealt with a lot of fluctuation of ambient temperatures. And then the picture on the right shows you how congested that got down there. Go ahead. Another shot of the scaffolding. There's some scaffolding that was not movable on both ends where the movable scaffolding couldn't reach. We had to have the scaffolding contractor come in and set up some semi-permanent ones, scaffolding. Go ahead. Every batch of backfill grout had to be tested, and the waste products from each batch had to be saved in a basically a dumpster and taken off to a settling pond where the water evaporates and the solids have to be put in a truck and hauled off site. It's tedious work. Every single batch has to be tested. Go ahead. Another thing that makes this more complicated is the picture on the left is the drill crew. Ahead of the grouting process, you have to have a crew of guys with drills ahead of the grout hoses, drilling holes in every one of these panels. There's a grout nozzle and there's a grout hole, and there's 4 observation holes for each panel, and sometimes more. That's tedious work too. And the picture on the right shows you how close the scaffolding is to the water. You can start to see some of the holes that have already been grouted. Go ahead. Another couple shots of how congested it gets down there. They eventually, at the end of in the fall, they got 2 plants running where they could pump twice as much grout. Go ahead. Another couple pictures of what that actually looked like during construction. You can see on the right where we started a system of circling holes and marking holes that either have been completed or partially completed or need to be completed. Go ahead. One of the things I threw in there was the picture on the right shows you a closer up image of one of the grout nozzles, and the little black instruments to the left of the grout nozzle are tilt meters. And we had a system of instruments that measure the uplift of that steel plate, because when you put a fluid behind it, it tends to exert pressure on that faceplate and it would move up. Those instruments would tell us when we had any amount of movement. So we knew that the faceplate was moving up because of hydrostatic pressure underneath it from the grout. So that was a very intricate piece of the puzzle too, was knowing when that faceplate was moving and when it wasn't. Go ahead. Another couple pictures of these grout ports and how the grouters move from one port to another. I threw this in here, especially the left image, because not only do the drillers have to come in and drill those holes in preparation for the grouters, once the grouters are through and they've moved on, another crew of guys has to come back through and they have to weld these little 4x4 steel plates on the holes that we just grouted to close them up. So you got to drill that out, you got to grout it, and then you got to close it. And each one takes a different crew of guys. So it's a fairly complicated process. Go ahead. Picture of a couple of shots of how it looks as they're grouting. The one on the picture on the left you can see how many people are on those swing stages, we call them, those movable scaffolding. During grouting, it takes a crew of guys. It's not just one guy sitting around watching the birds fly by. It's very intricate and it's time consuming. Go ahead. Another couple pictures of what the grouting looks like, and those little cover plates on the left that have to be welded after the fact. Go ahead. And lastly, this is a diagram that we use to track where we are with the grouting process. As Adam mentioned on his image, that green piece at the bottom was what got done last year. And then the little lighter green squares with the numbers in them are what we got done this year. And how that compares to the orange or brownish looking squares, which is what's left to do. You can see that we've got a long ways to go. We got a lot done this year. We got a late start and the river gave us problems, the debris. But overall, we think we're about 15% done. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I know we're running low on time, so I'll try to be brief through the next little bit, so that way we save some time for questions. One thing I will mention is that the group that put the scaffolding together did win an award for their ingenuity with coming up with the scaffolding. So you guys are really helping push some technology forward, so that's really cool. As Mike mentioned, there's several challenges that we faced, lots of changed conditions that we mentioned the last time we were here. And Mike mentioned some of the things that we've done to help move some of those things forward. Some of those things were the unexpected overburden soils, faceplate bulging that happened, and the contract modifications that had to happen because of that, as well as the record-breaking snowpack that we had. And so with the overburden soils we had, what that required us to do is we had to pivot, make some changes to the foundation grouting plan that we had in place, as well as the grout cap configuration that we had originally designed. So that took some time to put together the modification package so that way we could get that moving forward, and then update the grouting program so that way we could be ready for those overburden soils in the changed condition, as well as the grout cap modification needed, as Mike mentioned. So you can see an example of that here. This, once again, is something for reviewing later where we go into a little bit more detail. So we were aware of how some of these things were impacting the overall schedule, and we did lots of different things to help mitigate those things, such as changing the plan and moving as we gained more information, because when the design happened, a lot of this stuff was underwater. And so we were going with the best available information that we had at the time. The backfill grouting, as we mentioned last year, was bulging the plates. And so we did pivot and move. And as part of that is we moved forward with one grout mix for the whole faceplate behind there that we went with, which is a low density grout. Grout usually weighs anywhere between 85 to 95 pounds per cubic foot. This lighter grout weighs about 25 to 35 while still providing the support behind the plate. So that way it could support the liner, and is a very critical part to the overall system to minimize the amount of maintenance later. So that way we can turn over a good product with minimal maintenance to the district and minimal burden. So even though it does take a while, it's a very critical part and saves long-term maintenance for the district. Next item we tried was using faceplate restraint systems, and some of the issues we had with that, it didn't seem to quite provide the weight we wanted, but we did find success with the low density grout, as well as doing intermittent grouting, which means you go to a hole, if the plate moves more than an inch, you move off that hole, go somewhere else, let it cure for a day, then you come back and try to fill it up some more. Those were more successful routes than trying to hold it down. And so that's a lesson that we had that was learned very well this next year. And so what we're doing moving forward, modifying some of these contracts, and one of those is the backfill grouting, and working hand in hand with a contractor to try to find ways that we can move forward with them to try to help speed up the schedule. As you saw from that image showing the amount of work that we were able to do this last year, wasn't nearly as much as we would have liked, but we're hoping to play catch up this year and try to really take the lessons learned from this season and move forward with that. And then, as was mentioned also, is the outlet works issues. And so we've got the Albuquerque area office working hand in hand with the project, so that way we could try to minimize the amount of debris going in by trying to get a log boom installed, trying to have debris management plans put in place and people lined up to be able to have boats ready, so that way we can keep the outlet works open. Some mechanical rumbling was found while we were there. We had mechanical engineers look at that and find a resolution to that problem. And so moving forward is the next steps are the spillway modification and stilling basin. as we made you aware of last time, the the spillway is old, rusted out, so we're ripping it out and replacing the old rusty spillway with a new reinforced concrete spillway and bridge, as well as realigning the road, replacing that wave deflector with a concrete parapet wall and a wider road, as well as doing some changes to the emergency spillway dike and replacing that with a fuse plug. One thing that we are doing is we're combining the stilling basin, or we're working hard to combine the stilling basin with our spillway contract, so that way they can be done by a single contractor, but tracking the funds different because they are from two different pots of money. So that way we can have the work done quickly and cheaper by combining the two. So that way we can hopefully mobilize just one contractor to come out and do the work and share the equipment. And so to update quickly on the schedule and budget, this next year is a lot more finishing up the backfill grouting, starting the foundation grouting, working on getting the liner attachments for the liner, and then trying to get the spillway and the stilling basin under contract and ready for when that's ready to begin. And so here's some dates. We're really shooting hard and working hard towards trying to get everything completed, so that way water can be stored at the next reservoir restriction for the spillway by the water year starting in 2026 is our goal, that we're working very hard to try to make sure that some water can start being stored in 2026. The next schedule just shows when the spillway modification schedule will start. The new reservoir restriction with that will be 6859, which is about 44, which would provide about 42% of the reservoir capacity as partial storage at that time, which should help the district to have that date in mind as something that we're shooting hard for. And then that work should be completed in 2023, and hopeful to have that and the stilling basin done hand in hand to get those finished in time. The last thing I'll mention is that Albuquerque area office is working with Jason and company to plan a road trip. We're going to go out there with the board, so that way you guys can see the work going on face to face, ask questions while we're on site. And so we're going to work to coordinate that trip, so that way we can go out there, see it together, let you see firsthand some of the challenges we're facing. And we'd love to hear input that you guys have on the progress of the work. So I'll turn it over for questions now.
Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate it. I know that we do have questions and comments. That was a really great presentation, though. I am not